Hey, it's CDA and welcome back to episode 13 of this Super Proliferation run. And guys, I am getting a little bit worried because as you can see once I put up the menu, we are running really low on silicon. We are down to less than 1.4 million, and that sounds like a lot, but once again we have about half, by now actually more than half of that stuck below our mall on our pole. So I don't want to take down the mall, so we need to make sure we don't run out of silicon. We do have some untouched silicon left on one of our planets that I intentionally left untouched, so we can't actually run out of silicon unless we tap that resource, and we would be completely out of that. But that's not going to be anywhere close to enough to actually support the building setups that we currently have in place. So what can we do to fix that? Well, we want to be building warpers, so we can go to other systems and take care of that. Now, I might have mentioned this before, warpers are best made from green research. However, in order to make that, we need two more items, and that is graviton lenses as well as quantum processors. So that will be the next two things that we are making. However, I really want to start out with the simpler recipe for space warpers, and it's the graviton lens, just to make sure we can actually make sure we don't run out of any stuff, we don't get stuck. And even though we do want to quickly upgrade that to green science, we might as well start here to just make sure we basically cannot lose the game. So that means we need to start working on getting some graviton lens production going, and this will actually be a rather big build, so let's jump into that. Well then, before we can actually get started on the lenses, we are going to need one more thing, and that's, well, two more things specifically. We are going to need some particle colliders, and as you can see, we've already built all the inputs required for that, with the exception of one thing, and that is the frame materials. Luckily, this is not a very complicated build, at least not if you've been taking my approach to this. Because we are treating the nanotubes, which is probably the most complicated part of this, as a raw input because of the rare recipes associated with that. So we actually only need to build some alloy and some silicon, both of which are quite straightforward. So let's make sure we get some frame materials going. This is actually going to be a relatively small build, because even though we're going to need a lot of frame materials at some point, right now we don't, and I don't want to waste too much time making a large build. We're actually going to be upgrading the build quite soon anyway, because we are getting to the point where we are very close to unlocking the Mark III processor assembler, which will speed up things quite significantly. Now, let's make sure we leave some room for the proliferation. There we go. And then what do we need? We are going to need 3 types of smelters. So let's just make one of those over here. And we can do that probably like this. So a total of 8. This is going to be, what shall we make it? Let's make this the silicon, maybe? Yeah, why not? Actually, no, we are going to make this the titanium. Why titanium? Well, because I want this to be in the middle, because we are going to need to feed 3 things into the alloy production, and that is why we need to... I want to delete this. There we go. Shouldn't be that hard to delete an item, should it be? Okay, there we go. Okay, and then we have an outgoing belt somewhere over here, and we are going to leave some room for an outgoing belt over there. And then we have 2 more things to worry about. So first of all, we have to build some iron production. Once again, let's make sure we leave some room for an outgoing belt. Now we have the smelters, so making sure this is aligned. We are going to need exactly 8 of those, which means that we can easily do it like this and have another outgoing belt like that. And we are going to fix the belt, don't worry, but for now I'm just going to leave it as is. I am making, once again, this build more or less from scratch. I did the math beforehand, but actually didn't do the build beforehand, so this is just me giving you a little bit of insight into my brain. I was just looking at this belt, but now I don't think we can actually put the proliferator. Well, it's supposed to be fitting on here, but once again, I don't trust that with the belts. I think that will clip in the blueprint. So I am actually going to move all of this one little square to the right. But before we do that, we might as well just finish this. So let's see. This should go over there. And we have once again an outgoing belt. And then we have 4 more of those. And this is going to be the silicon. So let's mark those up. That's also going to be the silicon, right? Yeah. Just make sure we have the iron on the bottom, but I actually didn't mark that up. So let's make sure we do that. And there we go. Just a tiny little smelting facility. You might be wondering why I'm making it so wide. That is because we will need the room for other stuff later on in this build, I think. And I want to keep it a little bit square and compact, so we don't get all of these very long, stretchy builds if we don't have to. Because that gets really annoying with those ILSs that need a lot of white space. Okay, let me clean this up and move this all one little block to the right, and then let's continue on. And as the sun is rising over our planet, let's find a good place for this proliferator, and then let's build some steel smelters, shall we? Because we are going to need about 10 of those. And we're going to place them like this. And then we'll have an incoming belt that doesn't need to be quite this long, so let's remove that. And then we have an outgoing belt, something like this. Now, the steel is going to go straight into our production for alloy. And that is going to be extremely annoying because alloy, as always, needs 3 inputs. And I hate pretty much every item in the game that needs 3 inputs because, yeah, there's no really nice way, I think, to make a build that includes 3 inputs. Well, we can do this whole zigzagging thing, of course. Why is this not working? It's really not my day when it comes to this. Anyway, there we go. So, now we have steel, we have some titanium, so let's bring the titanium in as well. It can be on the same belt. And let's think for a moment. So we have the alloy, and that's going to need 3 inputs. It also needs the acid, which we can bring in from pretty much wherever we want. But we do need to make sure we are actually proliferating that as well. So let's see. I think we should actually move this up a little bit. So that we can do the following. We are going to have to get the acid from somewhere, and this will need to be proliferated, so let's make sure we put that in. And this also needs to be proliferated, but it doesn't need to be quite as far up. That's actually not on the same line, so let's make sure it is. There we go. And then this can go up. That means we have an open space here. So what I'm thinking now is let's put an ILS over here. It should fit, I think. Doesn't really matter where we put it exactly. I don't think so, but that might be cutting it a little close in terms of clipping with the blueprint. So let's not do that. And just take it one space up just to be safe. Now this one is actually full already, since we're requesting warpers and proliferators there as well. We have the titanium on that belt, so then all we need is the acid. So let's assume this is the acid belt. There we go. Now we are going to need a total of 12 of these. So what we could actually do is just put them all in a row. How much would that be? Does that make sense? Well, actually maybe it does. However, this is quite a lot, so if we reduce it to only 6, and yes, I realize I am making this a bit more complicated maybe than it necessarily needs to be. But no, actually I don't think so. I think we should be fine. Okay, so let's flip this around. Let's flip this around. And let's flip this around. There we go. This is going to be alloy. And then we are going to need another row of 6 over here. Now, the upside of that huge U-turn over there is that we now have a lot of space to do this. And this. And then we have, well, we could actually proliferate it over here, but that doesn't make sense since we also need to proliferate it over there. And I didn't actually leave a lot of room here for the proliferator. Let's see how this interacts with, yeah, that doesn't actually work. So I am going to move this up a little bit, and then we're going to focus on the last parts of our build. Surprise, I changed my mind. I was fiddling around a little bit with the build, and I concluded that there was not really any way to fit in the last assemblers quite neatly into the rest of this build. But it did occur to me that if we kind of just move everything around a little bit, basically this is the exact same build that we've just done with the alloy, with the kind of U-turn in here. There's still one belt to go with the acid, but putting it in here actually fits perfectly well and just makes the build a lot more neat, and that means we also simplify the last little bit slightly. Because what do we still need to do? Well, we are going to need to put in an ILS somewhere. Probably over here. So the goodest place as any. I think that should be no issue with clipping, hopefully. And then we can have the acid flipping around over here. What's with the lag today with the game? There we go. And go down like that. And then we are going to have acid over here. There we go. And then what else do we need? Well, we have some issue with the proliferation here now actually. So we do need to make sure that we remove those and replace those slightly. Oh, that was actually perfect. There we go. Replace those slightly. So we have both the steel as well as the alloy being proliferated. Yeah, we could also move that, but that doesn't really matter that much, I think. Now, what's the last thing that we need? Well, we are going to want to produce a lot, and I do mean a lot, of framework. And we are going to want to build 30 of those. And I don't think that's actually going to work. Leaving myself a lot of room with all this proliferation going on is still something I need to get used to. But if we do it like this, I think we should be fine. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, we have 3 items that we need to use. So we have the 3rd item coming in from over here, and that needs to be nanotubes. So nanotubes coming in over here like this. We already have the alloy coming in over here like that. And then we have the silicon over there as well. And that should be everything we need if I remember correctly. It's nanotubes, alloy, as well as silicon. We actually need a lot of nanotubes. So you will find that this build will probably initially not work at full speed. That's not a problem, just something to be aware of. And then what we are going to do, so this is actually all the inputs that we need from this one. So what we can do is, let's do it like this, is a little bit more neat. So this will be an outgoing belt, and that fixes all of that. So what we then want to do is bring this down, and actually this is also going to be on that belt. There we go. And we are going to take these 3 belts, bring them down here. And then go like that. Like that. And the last one. Where did my music go? Dear Dyson Sphere, you have such great music. Why not just keep it playing? Anyway. No, not like that. Not like that. Because we need to flip this around. Almost sound like Cobra Kai now. For those of you that watch the series. Anyway. There we go. And then we need another 10 like that. And then we have the last outgoing belt like this. And now the real question is once again, did I actually leave myself enough space? Yeah, seems I did. It's always, you always need more space than I expect, but that should actually be fine. So we have that outgoing belt proliferated, that outgoing belt, we have the alloy proliferated, we have the silicon proliferated, and we have the steel. Oh yeah, before I forget, we actually also need to proliferate the carbon nanotubes. There we go. That we hadn't actually put on the belt yet. This is making me a little nervous, but it should be working just fine, I think. Yeah, looks good. Okay, so that means that we need to kind of figure out all of this stuff and put in some sorters, put in some power, and finalize the build and see if it works. And there we go. You can see we have all kinds of materials zooming around our build. Some of them backing up because we have more than we necessarily need. I think we can actually shorten this belt a little bit. Doesn't need to be that long. But other than that, everything looks pretty good. We have everything proliferated as it looks like. Yep, we do. We are currently, we had to wait a little bit for our sulfuric acid to come in. So the alloy production is a little bit behind on the rest. That's why it feels like we're overproducing 2 items while underproducing the rest. That's actually not the case. It's just that this started out a little bit later than the rest. So that is the reason why you see this backing up. But all in all, I think we should have a pretty decent production, assuming, of course, that we actually have somewhere for it to go. There you go. And as you can see, our drones are flying off. I was wondering what was happening to the surplus, but yeah, don't forget, we have our mall ready to go, requesting a lot of frames to produce some of the buildings that we haven't produced yet. Specifically, a very important building that we will need to actually be able to produce the lenses, and that is the particle collider. Because, as you can see, this needs the frame materials. We have everything else, just not the frame materials. And we need, in order to make the lenses, we are going to need diamonds. Well, that's not that interesting, but we also need strange matter. And strange matter can only be made in a particle collider. You can't even craft it in your inventory. So yeah, we definitely need some particle colliders. So while those are being produced, let's find a new spot for our next build, and that will be the lenses. Okay, then this is as good a spot as any, so let's get this started. We are going to need, of course, an ILS, and I'm just putting it here for the sake of reference, but we might have to move this later on, but we are going to build some smelters. And once again, just to make sure we have enough room, let's build a little belt over here. Let's place down a proliferator somewhere like this, so we have enough room, so we know more or less where we need to start with our smelters. Now, we are going to need at least 2 rows, and let's give ourselves a little bit more space. We are going to need 11 iron smelters over here, and that's actually not going to be quite enough, so we are going to put in a second line as well, and we need 10 more. Now, personal preference, I like to keep my uneven numbers, or at least the off row on the side that we have the incoming belts, so let's do that like that. And let's make sure this is actually iron. Oh, that does not work if you start out with a different number on the second row. Stop struggling with me. There we go. Okay. So we can basically have some iron coming in on that belt, and then we should be good to go. Now, of course, we need to make sure we have some outgoing belts as well. So let's combine those somewhere up here. And we'll have to see where we actually have that go, but we'll leave that there for a moment. And then we are going to need some copper as well. So let's have the copper down here. And we are going to need exactly 11 copper as well. So that's a nice number, assuming we align that properly. Because we do want it to look pretty, don't we? And there we go. Okay. So, and we will have an outgoing belt for that as well. So let's make sure that's more or less parallel to the other one. And then we can have copper here. Now that also means we'll have to have an incoming belt for copper ore. This might not be the final location for that, but let's just work with that for now. And then, last but not least, we are going to need some magnets. And I am going to put the magnets below here. And let's see, let's start with 11 as well, just to keep that nice and tidy. But we are, oh, actually we want to move that down a little bit, so let's do it like this. Because we of course need an outgoing belt for that as well, and then we can have the input on the middle. So this is 11, so we actually need only 6 more, and again, this is just personal preference, but let's have those over here. So let's do it like this. Something like this. Okay. Actually, no, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Let's actually put it over here. Doesn't really matter this, to be honest, but yeah. I don't want to be looking at this half an hour from now and thinking, no, that's not right. Okay, so this is all these smelters that we need. And of course we need to put in some belts and some sorters to make sure we have everything set up correctly. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll move on to the second part. Okay, so there we go. We have set up the belts. I organized them a little bit differently so that we have that up. I actually, oh, this can go now. I moved down the ILS and I actually made the magnet smelters now. So sorry about that. Next up on the list, we need some cogs, we need some coils, and we need some engines, because yes, we are once again going to make some turbines. Now, in order to do that, I am going to place the build, and once again in a way that I think is really neat. So this is going to be the cogs. They need the iron that is up on the top belt, and we are going to be placing the assemblers for the coils over here. It's actually the same amount, technically not exactly the same amount, but rounded down because of all the proliferation going on. We have all kinds of different fractions of materials that we need. Now this is going to go through, this is going to go through as well, and then we have an outgoing belt of coils over here. And this is actually going to turn out really nice, I think, but bear with me there for a moment. We are going to have this belt here, and then we are going to have an outgoing belt of cogs over there. So yes, that should work. Now we are going to want to proliferate this, of course, so we're going to, not that one, that's the iron that is already proliferated. No point in proliferating it again. And then what else do we need? Well, we are actually going to need some engines, like I said. And in order to make those engines, we are going to need all 3 of these items. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this back around. And do that like this, probably. Making part of this build on the fly again, so since you guys seem to like that, why not? You can get a little bit of insight into my thought process. I do reserve the right to completely change my build if it turns out to be that way, but usually I think I've gotten the hang of building nice, organized builds by now, so I shouldn't have too much danger of that happening. No, not from there. We are going to make the build for the engines over here. It's going to need to be 16, so we actually need 1 more in the row. Per row engines is what I was looking for. There we go. And as you can see, because we only have 7 on these rows, we can actually use this little additional space for the additional assembler. Now the downside of doing it like this, and this is a bit of preference, is that we can't have that straight belt going through in terms of the proliferation. So yeah, not entirely sure whether or not I prefer it. We can actually solve that, I just realized. And let's do that before I forget. We can actually flip the proliferator around. There we go, and now it should be able to just pass past the assembler. There we go. Is this the correct belt? No, this is the iron belt again. This belt was the one I was looking for. There we go. Okay, so now we have the 3 inputs on this side, so that should be just fine. And then we can have an outgoing belt for these engines over here, so that's going to go in this direction. And now it actually will be, well, yeah, I think we should be able to do this. We just have to flip around the proliferator, but we can also proliferate this. We should have enough room to output on the belt. And now we can place an additional row of assemblers over here. And yeah, unlike the last build that we've showed, we can't actually keep these built exactly aligned with all the other smelters. There's just too many different items in here that need different amounts of stuff. So yeah, we'll just have to deal with that not being exactly symmetric, but in terms of the width of this build, so far we seem to be pretty much aligned with our initial lines of building, so that should just be fine. And there we go. So now we have the inputs and outputs on both sides. I'm once again going to clean this up, put in some power, put in some sorters, and then we'll continue on with the third part. So I got a little bit more organized and put in some labels so I actually know what is on which belt, because it gets really confusing really fast and I don't want to have sorters drawing in from the wrong belts and things like that. But all in all, so far so good. Now we actually do need to extend this belt a little bit, because we also need these coils for the turbines, which is the next thing we are going to be building. I am going to see though, let's see, how do we want to build that? This should be aligned with this. And then if we put down 6, I'm actually going to remove that one. So we have some working space over there, and this is going to be turbines. And we actually need more turbines than this. Oh, let's do that correctly. A little lag in my game here. Why is that? Not entirely sure. It's not like we're anywhere near the end game at the moment, but anyway. Yeah, so we have some coils over here and we have engines over here, so that is just fine. What we then need is we are also going to need some turbines over here. Let's make sure we align that properly. There we go. And then we can simply wrap around the turbines, the coils like this. And then what we can do is then we can have another belt with an outgoing belt of turbines going something like this, and wrapping around and going like that. Now, I think we should be able to fit in an proliferator over here in such a way, like this, that we can actually move this belt up. And I think like this. And I am working a little bit on the fly here, so go easy on me if you're wondering what are you doing. And then we are going to put in 6. Yeah, that's not going to work. Okay, so let's see. We are going to put in 6. Not like that. Not like that. Okay, actually, let's do it a little bit more organized than this. And yes, I am a stickler for wanting to get this right, because what we are going to do over here is we are going to put in the particle containers. Sorry, I was just thinking about this build. I think actually this build needs to go down one level. Why? Because particle containers are annoying because they have 3 inputs. We have 2 of them actually right over here, so that's going to be just fine. Once again, not over there. Over there either. Aligned, aligned. There we go. And then we have... So what we can actually do... Then we have this over here. Then we can have 2 of the inputs go through the middle. And we are going to need to build a little bridge. And I actually prefer doing it like this in this occasion. I haven't actually used a proper bridge in a while, I think so. We need the copper, which is coming from down over there. It's quite nicely aligned with everything else. So then we have the copper, and just to give you a quick reminder, for the particle containers we need the turbines, copper and graphene. Now graphene we are treating as a raw resource, so we are going to have to put that in from somewhere else. But that should not be a problem, because what we can do is this. So now we have 2 inputs fixed. We can't put the 3rd input in the middle, because then you will get into sorter issues. In case you're wondering why I'm doing this like this, I can actually put a belt over here as well, but I am pretty sure that if you place this somewhere else on the planet, this is going to clip in the blueprint. So I'm just doing this just to be safe that the blueprint will actually work for you guys as well. And then we have an outgoing belt that we need to put in for the particle containers. You have an incoming belt for the graphene. So I'm actually going to clean this part up a little bit, and then we're going to plan ahead for the last part, or second to last part actually, I think, just to make sure that we know where we want to have that graphene coming in from. Okay, so this was a little bit of a puzzle, but it turns out that if you have 3 belts in the middle, well, of course we already know we can't draw from both sides because you have conflicting sorters, but specifically it turns out that if you add in 1 more belt, that only works if you put in the belt on the outside that is the same as the inside belt on the opposite side. So in this case, the inside belt on this side being the graphene means you need to put in the graphene on the outside belt over there. Why? Because you are actually blocking the inside belt on this side with your 3 sorters, so there's no way you can reach that from the other side. So that's why this belt needs to be whatever is on the inside on the other side. I hope that made any sense. But it's good to keep in mind so you don't have to fiddle around too much with these belts and you're not putting in more belts than you need. We also have 2 outgoing belts. The particle colliders are actually being proliferated over here and then go through the ILS, and then they're proliferated over here once more. Why? Because this belt might stack up in case we are producing more strange matter than we actually need, and or lenses actually than we need. That's not very likely to happen, but it could. And in that case, this ILS will be set to provide the particle containers as well. But in that case, we want to make sure that they are actually proliferated, and they are. So that's good. There's also diamonds coming in now that I put in all the way from the other side. Why all the way from the other side? Well, I actually want to use the last slot in here for not strange matter, but for the lenses, these. And that means this ILS is full. You could free up a slot by making a bridge for the particle colliders and removing this one. Nothing wrong with that per se, other than the fact that you won't be able to use it as a backup container facility. But that would mean that you don't have to bring in the diamonds all the way from the other side. They are from the starting ILS in this build. There's not really any cost in doing that other than a few extra belts, so completely up to you whether or not you want that or not, but that's the way I went for it. Also because we actually had 1 open slot in this ILS, so we might as well put it to use, was my reasoning. You might also wondering where this frame build came from that you did see in the first half of this episode, but wasn't here when we were first building this. And we will not talk about this because I totally did not realize halfway through this build that I actually needed particle colliders. So we are going to pretend that the first half of this episode actually happened before I did the first half of this build. Okay, so we all established my genius and completely not forgetting things to built before to building other things, and now we are going to be building some colliders that we totally had prepared all the way before we started this build. Now, we are going to need 16 of these, so this is 6, 7, 8. And particle colliders are huge, big, power-hungry things, by the way, in case you didn't already know. And I think if we place it like this, we should be able to just fit in a belt. Yep, that will work. And I'll just leave it like this. We are going to build another row of those, but it's a lot easier to build these if we can just see what we're doing. And let's make sure we wrap that up correctly. Is this actually aligned or not? No, it's not. I was about to say, this doesn't feel right. Okay, so like that. And once again, just testing if there's indeed just one slot. Yes, there is. Good. And now we are going to put it through like this. And I think we can actually put this one a little closer. There we go. And that's going to be like that. Okay, so now the second two we can do a little faster than that. There we go. And then we also need to bring around the iron and iron, etc. Huge fun discussion beneath one of the previous videos on the pronunciation of iron, etc. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 8. Good. Okay, and now what we are going to do is we are going to take a belt, go through the middle, and then let's make sure we don't make it any wider than it needs to be. There we go. Hello, autosave. And then we can bring it all the way back. And then we have over here the outgoing belt for the strange matter. Now, we are also going to be bringing up the diamonds over here. And once again, this is not the most efficient way to do it, but it is the only way to do it if you want to keep the build pretty. And I like my pretty builds, so I am going to leave 3 spaces. And then we are going to be putting in assemblers like this. And we are going to place 4. And then there will be an outgoing belt through the middle. And then we're going to place 4 more. Actually, no, not like this. Sorry about that. Because what we want to be doing is bring this down. Why is this complete? Oh, there's actually a little piece of belt there. Okay. And down there. Not that far down actually, but we will fix that in a moment. There we go. And then this is the one that will have the outgoing belt through the middle. And that will be going all the way back over there. And we are going to need 16 of these as well. Technically only 15, but I don't care. Might as well make it look good. It's the only additional one in the build, but hey, you never know if this ever stacks up and we might need this one to rebalance the build a lot quicker. Sounds like a pretty good excuse, right? And like I said, this is going to be the lenses. And we will have everything we need on these belts because we have the diamonds. Let me see, this is the strange matter that we are producing in the colliders. This is the diamonds. And that goes all the way zigzagging through. And then we'll have an outgoing belt with a, where are you? Lenses there. And more lenses over here. And then this top row can actually just output it straight on the belt where it needs to go in the end anyway. And that does mean that we will need to proliferate it somewhere along the way. Now there's a few options for that, but I like doing it over here. And I actually left this open so we have a way for the belt to go through zigzagging. So it doesn't need to be on top of another belt. Okay, so I am going to clean this up and then we're going to see if this actually works. Okay, so we're all up and running, and I realized I forgot to explain a few last details of the particle collider. So as you can see, there is little belts in between that go to that central belt for the outputs. There's one for each duo of colliders, so we don't have too many belts and that are basically overkill. And other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So we have all the inputs and outputs that we've just discussed. I made sure we have the foundations. We now have both builds that we've made so far nicely next to each other, very organized, and kind of nice to have them all together. Where did my light go? Anyway, you can see the smelting facilities are now starting to work with the ore coming in. We have a lot of engines coming through. We have the turbines working as intended. That should mean that, yep, our particle containers are also starting to work on both sides. So that is good. Everything is being proliferated as planned, and there you can see our first particle collider starting to work. We might actually get a milestone for that, not entirely sure. Well, let's find out. Yeah, there we go. And as you can see, there's the first little bit of strange matter going. And as you can see, this production is really, really slow. And that is why we need so many of them for only 3 lenses per second. So remember, this is only a build that makes 3 lenses per second. That's plenty for now, just to realize that we need all of that just to make those 3 lenses every second. And yeah, the first lenses are incoming. Apparently we do not get a milestone for that. That's interesting. But of course now we're not quite done, because now we have lenses and that's all nice and dandy, but we don't actually have the warpers yet. Now, I've been very careful to make sure we set warpers to every single build that we've made so far. But let's make actual warpers, shall we? And last but definitely not least, the build for our warpers. Now remember, there's 2 recipes for warpers, one with green lenses that you don't necessarily want to use because it's a really inefficient way to make warpers, but it's also the only way we have for now to make warpers. We will be fixing that in the next episode. But for now, it's the only way, so there's nothing wrong with making some warpers from green lenses at first. So I will be making basically this build twice. There is 2 rows of 15 assemblers making these warpers, and that will add up to a full belt of warpers in the green science recipe. So once we're using green science, we'll be getting a full belt of warpers, which is way more than we'll need for pretty much the rest of the game. But it's a really simple build, so you might as well make sure you have enough. But you will want to either use the second blueprint that I will be providing once you get access to the green science, and then remove this one, or alternatively change the lenses in this build to green science, and make sure you change the recipe as well, because the default recipe, even though it suggests otherwise when you look at it in the creation screen, this actually only works with the lenses, so you will need to select the other recipe. But yeah, other than that, this works just fine. We now have warpers. Like I said, I have been really careful to make sure I include warpers in every single build so far. So you can see that all the warpers we are making are now already being exported to our other ILSs. I'm not actually sure where they are going first, so by the looks of it, it actually goes just around the corner. As you can see, this build actually now has some warpers being supplied. It's already almost full, so as soon as we have a little bit more warpers, we will be getting to that, etc, etc. It'll just keep going. Remember, we don't actually have a use for the warpers in our ILSs at the moment because we have been only building in our current system. But as soon as we fly to another system, which we can do now if we want, yeah, we will need those warpers to actually make sure that stuff is exported around the entire universe. So this was a little longer than I expected, mainly because we ended up making 2 pretty decent builds, while I was only expecting to do well, these 2 rather than these 3, I should say. But all in all, I hope you enjoyed building them with me, and I hope to catch you in the next one.